Throughout life, people seek different ways that they believe will please them and others. Most of the time, we choose wrong direction thinking that this will please my life, this will please my family, this will please my friends. But dear friends, we are called to please God. In Luke chapter 20, verse 21, Jesus taught about pleasing the way of God. When we come to Acts chapter 18, verse 26, Priscilla and Aquila also taught about God to the person called Apollos. Dear friends, it is very important to please God and also to teach others to please God. Today, I have entitled my devotion as Way of Pleasing God. The way of pleasing God. Proverbs chapter 16 verse 2 says, all a person's ways seems pure to them, but motives are waged by the Lord. While we may think our actions are right and just, how do they look before God? Are we walking in His ways? Or are we going away from His presence? We need to walk in His ways so that we can please the Lord. As a believers, as a children of God, it is our responsibility to live for the Lord. It is our responsibility to please the Lord in every areas of our lives. Whether it is physical, financial, spiritual, emotional, psychological, in every areas, we need to please Him. What is the meaning of pleasing God? The way of pleasing God is about living a life aligned with His desires, commands, and principles in every area of our lives. It is a commitment to follow His righteous ways. Dear friends, here I just want to talk few things about why should we walk in the way of pleasing God. Why should we walk in the way of pleasing God? First of all, it leads to true life. It leads to true life. Jesus is our ultimate role model, walking in complete obedience to God's will. Even until his last moments, he submitted his life to his Father. In every way, he submitted to his Father. Many times, we don't know how to please God. That is what Psalmist is explaining to us in Psalm chapter 25, verse 4. Lord, show me your ways, teach me your paths. Because God's ways are good, God's ways are truth, God's ways are holy, and God's ways are righteous. Dear friends, we need to please God in every situation because it is a way of true life. Secondly, why should we walk in the way of pleasing God? When we please God, it reflects Jesus in our life. When we walk in the way of pleasing to the Lord, that means we are reflecting Christ in our everyday life. As a followers of Christ, we need to reflect Christ in our walk, in our talk, in our behavior, in our communication with others. We need to always reflect Christ in our lives. That is what in Galatians chapter 2 verse 20, Paul reminds us, I have been crucified with Christ and no longer I live, but Christ lives in me. When we come to Isaiah chapter 55 verse 8, Isaiah says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. We may be working in different companies, different organizations. We may be doing ministry in different denominations. But we need to understand we should always reflect Christ in our lives. We should always carry the Christ nature in our life. That is what we are called for. Thirdly, why should we walk in the way of pleasing God? We are commanded to walk in His ways. God has commanded us to walk in His ways. God has called us to stay closely to Him. God has called us to live for Him. God has called us to do great and mighty things for Him. God has called us to walk in His ways. That's what we are called. When God called Israelites and God asked them to obey His command, love Him, and follow Him wholeheartedly, that's what Deuteronomy chapter 10 verse 12 explains, I am not asking anything else except to walk in my ways, love me, and follow my commands. Even today, God is asking that to us. When we walk in His ways, when we obey His commands, when we love Him more than anything else, we can confidently say that I am a child of God. Dear friends, why should we walk in the way of pleasing God? Because that leads us to the true life. Secondly, that helps us to reflect Christ in our life. Finally, God commanded us to follow Him. The benefit of walking in the way of pleasing God. First, we'll have peace with our enemies. When we walk in God's ways, we'll have peace with our enemies. Proverbs chapter 16:7 says, when the Lord takes pleasure in anyone's way, He causes their enemies to make peace with them. Secondly, the benefit is we can boldly live a righteous life. We can come out of all kinds of worldly things, evil things, evil desires, and we can live for God alone. Psalms 119 verse 1 to 3 says, blessed are those whose ways are blameless, who walk according to the law of the Lord. They do no wrong, but follow His ways. Thirdly, when we walk in the way of pleasing God, we can have the divine protection in our lives. We will always have divine protection in our lives. Jonah chapter 3 verse 10 explained to us. When we read the entire book of Jonah, we can clearly understand the way God protected Jonah and the people of Nineveh. The same God is with us today. When we face challenges, when we go through struggles, when we go through difficulties in our lives, if we are right with God, if we are following His ways, we can also have that assurance that God's divine protection upon our lives. Finally, the benefit is no one will stand against you. No one will stand against you. Deuteronomy chapter 11 verse 22 to 25, if you read, we can clearly understand that God is promising to His people, nobody will come against you. But you need to follow my commands. You need to follow my decrees. You need to live for me alone. When we do that, God will do great and mighty things in our lives. Dear friends, 2 Samuel chapter 22 verse 22 says, for I have kept the ways of the Lord. I am not guilty of turning from my God. Samuel is boldly saying that I have kept the way of the Lord in my life. How many of us can say that? I have kept the way of the Lord in my life. I have followed God's commandment faithfully. I have obeyed God's commands faithfully. Are we able to say that? If not, we need to introspect our life. We need to examine ourselves. Surrender to God's will. We need to surrender our lives to God's will. The way Christ has submitted His life to His Father's will. We need to reflect Christ in our daily life, everyday life. Wherever we go, whatever we do, we need to reflect this Christ in our lives. Seeking divine guidance in every decision. Whatever the decision we make, let us go to God and ask divine guidance. And walking with humility. Walking with humility will help us to walk in the way of pleasing to the Lord. May God help us to walk in His ways. May God help us to please Him. Let us surrender our lives to God. Let Him take complete control of our lives. May God bless you.